All right, let's kick off this deep dive. And today we're going to be looking at the High Elf Wizard in Dungeons & Dragons. And we're going to be focusing specifically on the D&D starter set rulebook and the first level character. Really, the goal today is for you to walk away understanding the ins and outs of playing this class, especially at that crucial starting level. So we're talking spell casting, those awesome elven traits, and how to really make the most of those first level abilities, both in combat and out of combat. We'll be talking about how to use those spells like Detect Magic, Magic Missile, and Sleep.
You got it. Think of this as like your crash course into everything you need to know to make this high elf wizard really sing right from the get-go.
Okay, so like first level abilities. What is it about the High Elf that makes it such a great fit for the wizard class at this level?
Well, high elves just have this natural affinity for magic, right? It's kind of in their blood. They're known for their intelligence, their grace, centuries of knowledge. All of that makes them really prime candidates for wielding arcane power, right? I mean, unlike some other classes that might rely on divine blessings or brute strength, wizards are all about tapping into the raw energy of magic. And they do that through study and focus.
So it's brains over brawn in this case.
Yeah.
But how does that actually translate to gameplay, right? Like at first level, what can a fledgling wizard actually do?
Well, even at first level, a wizard is surprisingly versatile, especially when it comes to spellcasting. You can think of it like having a toolbox full of different magical solutions for different problems. The trick is learning how to use the right tool at the right time.
Speaking of tools, can we talk about spellcasting mechanics for a second? This could
Oh.
be a little intimidating for new players. What's the deal with spell slots and components and all that jargon?
Sure, sure. It might seem a little complicated at first, but honestly, it's pretty intuitive once you get the hang of it. Think of it like this. Imagine your spell slots are like charges in a magical battery. You've got a limited number of charges each day, and different spells require different amounts of charge to cast, right? At first level, your wizard has two first-level spell slots. So that means you can cast two first-level spells before you need to take a long rest to get them back.
Oh, so resource management is key here, no just throwing fireballs left and right.
Exactly, exactly. You also need to think about the components for each spell. There's verbal, V, which is, the incantation you speak aloud. Somatic, S, that's the hand gestures and movements. And sometimes material M, which is a specific object or ingredient, right? So like if you're gagged and bound, you might have trouble casting a spell with verbal and somatic components.
That makes sense. It's like a recipe.
Exactly. Yeah. You also need to keep in mind the casting time of a spell, right? How long it takes to actually cast the spell. A lot of spells will require an action, which means you can only do one spell per turn.
So you got to plan carefully.
Yeah, especially in combat. You can't just be spamming all your most powerful spells every turn. You have to think tactically about when to use your limited spell slots and which spells will be most effective in a given situation.
Let's get into some specific spells. Our listener today is really interested in Detect Magic. Magic Missile, Shield, Sleep, and thunderwave. What can you tell us about those?
So these are all excellent choices for a starting wizard. Detect Magic, as the name suggests, lets you sense the presence of magic. It's incredibly useful for, finding hidden traps, identifying magical items, even getting a sense of what kind of magical creatures you might be up against. So imagine you're in a dungeon, right? You come across a chest, use Detect Magic before you open it. It might save you from triggering a nasty magical trap.
Right, I better safe than sorry. What about Magic Missile? That one's a classic.
It is a classic for a reason. Magic Missile is a great spell for beginners because it's a guaranteed hit, right? You launch these multiple darts of magical force, and they automatically strike your target. They do a little bit of force damage, but they're great for, finishing off a weakened enemy or delivering a really precise attack at range.
A magical sniper shot.
Exactly. And since it always hits, you don't have to worry about rolling dice or missing. What's cool about Magic Missile, too, is that you create more darts as you level up, so it's a spell you can really rely on.
Okay, so I can already see myself taking out goblins with pinpoint accuracy. But, wizards aren't exactly known for being tough. What sort of defensive options do we have?
Well, when it comes to defense, Shield is your best friend. It's a reaction spell, which means you can cast it instantly when you're attacked. And what it does is it creates this magical barrier around you, it boosts your armor class, and it makes you much harder to hit.
So it's like a magical force field.
Exactly. And Shield can be a real lifesaver, especially when you're caught off guard or facing, a really powerful enemy.
Let's talk crowd control.
Okay.
Sleep is a pretty strong spell.
It is.
Can incapacitate multiple low-level enemies.
Absolutely.
Basically puts them to sleep, right?
Yeah, you're essentially putting them to sleep for a short period. It gives you and your party a big tactical advantage.
So I could like put a whole group of goblins to sleep.
Potentially, yeah. But you gotta keep in mind, sleep only works on creatures with a certain number of hit points, right? And they can wake up if they take any damage.
Okay, so no putting dragons to sleep in this one.
Maybe a baby dragon.
Now, thunderwave, this is what you use when things get a little too close for comfort.
Yeah, thunderwave is great for when you need to create some space. What it does is it creates this wave of thunderous force that pushes back creatures and objects in a 15-foot cube. It's perfect for, creating some breathing room in a crowded fight, knocking enemies off balance.
Like a sonic boom?
Yeah, you could think of it that way.
Especially when you're surrounded by goblins.
Just be careful where you aim it, though. You don't want to accidentally push your allies off a cliff or collapse a wall or something. Thunderwave can be very powerful, but like any spell, it takes some tactical thinking.
Okay, this is making me feel a lot more confident about playing a wizard. But what about when you don't want to use up your spell slots? What are cantrips, and how do those fit into a wizard's arsenal?
Cantrips are great. They're like a wizard's bread and butter. They're like mini spells, right, that don't require any spell slots, so you can cast them as often as you like without worrying about, running out of magical juice.
Yeah.
They may not be as flashy or as powerful as some of your leveled spells, but they are incredibly versatile.
Okay, so unlimited power. What cantrips should our listener be thinking about?
So there are a few cantrips that you'll want to keep in mind. Mage Hand is a good one. That lets you manipulate objects at a distance. You basically create the spectral hand that you can use to open doors, retrieve items, maybe even flip a switch without having to put yourself in harm's way.
So really useful for those tricky situations.
Yeah.
Avoiding traps and all that.
Uh-huh. Then there's Ray of Frost. That's your go-to ranged attack cantrip. It shoots this beam of cold energy, does a little bit of damage, and it can also slow down your enemies, make them easier targets for you and your allies.
So like a magical ice blast.
Yeah, exactly.
Keep those goblins away.
Yep. And then we have prestidigitation. This one's all about minor magical effects, right? So it can clean objects, create small illusions, even flavor food.
Wait a minute. I can use magic to make my dungeon rations taste better?
Well, it can't create new substances, but it can alter the flavor or appearance of things. So you could make your rations taste like roast chicken, even if they're really just stale bread and dried meat.
That's awesome. What about combat cantrips? What do we have there?
Your best bet for close combat is going to be Shocking Grasp. It's a melee attack, it does lightning damage, and it also has this added benefit of preventing your target from taking reactions.
Oh, so I could zap a goblin and stop it from dodging out of the way.
Exactly. It's a great way to disrupt an enemy and gain an advantage.
All right, and finally we have the short sword.
Right.
This is listed as an option, but I'm guessing?
Yeah, wizards aren't proficient with weapons. They're much better off relying on their spells and cantrips for offense.
So leave the sword fighting to the fighters.
Exactly. Your spells and cantrips are your most powerful weapons.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. Spell slots, components, casting times, a whole bunch of spells and cantrips. That's a lot to take in.
It is. But don't worry, it all becomes second nature once you start playing. And we'll actually dive into even more essential knowledge about high elf wizards, including those unique racial traits and some special spellcasting techniques when we come back.
Sounds good to me. Stay tuned. All right, so we've covered the basics of spellcasting, explored those essential first-level spells and cantrips. Now let's get into some of those special techniques that can give your high elf wizard an extra edge.
Right, we're talking ritual casting and arcane recovery. Two mechanics that can really enhance your wizarding game.
Okay, let's start with ritual casting. What makes it so ritualistic?
Okay, well, imagine you're in a dungeon. Dark, mysterious, you know the deal. You come across a door, it's got these strange symbols on it. You think it might be magical, but you don't want to waste a spell slot on detect magic, just to be sure.
Yeah, you want to save those spell slots for when you really need them.
Exactly. That's where ritual casting comes in. See, some spells like detect magic, they have this ritual tag. That means you can cast them without using up a spell slot. The catch is, it takes 10 minutes longer.
So it's like time for resources. That's the trade-off.
Exactly, yeah. It's perfect for when you're not in immediate danger. You can be a little more methodical. You could also use it for, like, deciphering ancient texts with comprehend languages, or setting up a magical alarm with the alarm spell.
Right, so it's like the slow and steady approach to magic.
Exactly.
Okay, what about arcane recovery?
Arcane recovery. This one lets wizards recover some of their spell slots during a short rest.
Wait, so I don't always need a full night's sleep to get my magic back.
Not always, no. At first level, you can recover one first-level spell slot during a short rest, which usually takes about an hour. So it's a nice way to top up your magical power, get ready for that next encounter.
So I can be a little more flexible in my adventuring, right? I don't have to be quite so stingy with those spell slots.
Exactly.
Okay, let's talk high elf racial traits. These are the things that make them even better at magic.
Yeah.
We're focusing on darkvision and fey ancestry.
Okay.
Darkvision, that's pretty straightforward, right? You can see in the dark. Super useful in those dungeons.
Yeah, it's like having built-in night vision goggles. You can see in dim light within 60 feet as if it were bright light, and in darkness as if it were dim light. Now, you won't be able to see color in darkness, just shades of gray. But it's still a huge advantage in those shadowy places.
No more fumbling around with torches.
Huh.
Now, fey ancestry, does that mean I'm related to fairies or something?
Not quite. But it does give you a bit of that otherworldly resilience. Basically, fey ancestry makes you immune to magical sleep, and it gives you advantage on saving throws against being charmed.
Hold on. Advantage. What does that mean exactly?
Okay, so advantage basically means you get to roll 2 dice instead of 1, and you take the higher result. So in this case, it applies to saving throws against being charmed. Makes it a lot harder for someone to, control your mind with magic.
So those enchantresses won't be a problem for me.
Well, you still have to make the saving throw, but you've got a much better chance of resisting. And that immunity to magical sleep. Real lifesaver when you're facing a creature that tries to put you to sleep with a spell.
Okay, before we wrap up, let's do a quick recap of those spellcasting mechanics.
Good idea.
Just to make sure we're all on the same page.
We have covered a lot.
Yep.
Let's start with spell slots, right? They're like the core of a wizard's power. You have a limited number for each spell level, and you use one up every time you cast a spell. Higher the level, the more powerful the spell, but also the higher level slot you need.
Limited fuel for your magic.
Exactly. Gotta use it wisely.
Then we have those spell components.
Yeah, you've got to meet those verbal, somatic, and material components to cast a spell. So, like, if you're silenced, you can't cast a spell with a verbal component.
Right, those little details matter.
They do. And then there's casting time, how long it takes to cast a spell. Most spells use an action, so 1 spell per turn. But some might have a shorter casting time, like a bonus action. Or a longer one, something that requires concentration over several turns.
All about timing.
Yeah.
Choosing the right spells for the moment.
Absolutely. And don't forget those special mechanics, right? Ritual casting lets you save those spell slots. Arcane recovery lets you get some of them back during a short rest.
Strategic resource management.
Exactly. And of course, those high elf traits. Dark vision for the dark, fey ancestry for resisting mind control, and magical sleep.
Not bad for a first-level wizard.
Not bad at all. With a bit of clever spell selection, some tactical thinking, and a dash of creativity, you can be a real force to be reckoned with, even at this early level.
Now, we know that's a lot to take in, but don't worry. We'll be back after a short break to leave you with some final thoughts. And maybe a little challenge to ponder. Stay tuned. All right, welcome back to our final look at the High Elf Wizard. We've laid the groundwork, spellcasting, those racial traits, a bunch of spells and cantrips. But, knowing all that is one thing. Actually playing the game is another, right?
Yeah, exactly. So let's put this knowledge into action. Let's say you're in that classic D&D situation. You're in a dimly lit dungeon, and of course, what's waiting around the corner?
Oh, no, not goblins.
Goblins, of course.
Of course.
So what's your first move as a brand new, fresh-faced, first-level wizard?
Well, I guess first things first, dark vision, right? I can see those goblins before they see me.
Exactly, you got it. So you can use that to your advantage, get into position, plan your attack.
But goblins love to swarm, right? Even if I have a head start, how do I deal with a whole bunch of them?
Okay, so this is where your spell selection really comes into play. Sleep is your friend here. It's super effective against low-level creatures like goblins. A well-placed sleep spell, you could take out half of them right off the bat.
Nice. A tactical nap time for the goblins. But what about the ones that don't fall asleep? Like I said, I'm not exactly built for hand-to-hand combat.
Okay, so for that, you've got spells like thunderwave and shield. If those goblins try to get in close, thunderwave can blast them backwards, give you some breathing room.
I love the idea of just clearing a room with a wave of thunder.
It's very dramatic.
But that's a spell slot, right?
Yeah, it is. And that's why it's important to manage those spell slots. If you think you might need thunderwave later, shield is a good option. Remember, it's a reaction, so you can cast it in an instant. Makes you much harder to hit.
So it's like a magical get-out-of-jail-free card.
Yeah.
But what if I've already used up all my spell slots?
Well, that's where those cantrips come in. Remember those?
Oh, right. Unlimited power.
Almost. Ray of Frost is good for some ranged damage. And Shocking Grasp. That's your friend in close combat. Remember, cantrips. You can use them as much as you want.
I'm starting to see that playing a wizard is all about strategy,
Yeah, you got it.
resource management.
It's not just about knowing the spells, it's about knowing when to use them. And as you gain experience, you'll get better and better at that.
So if there was one thing you want our listener to take away from all this, what would it be?
Don't be afraid to get creative. You're a spellcaster, but that doesn't mean you're just a glass cannon. With a little planning, a little strategy, you can be incredibly effective even at first level.
And don't forget those elven traits, darkvision, fey ancestry. Those can really save your bacon.
They can.
Heck
Okay,
yeah.
here's a final thought for our listener. Let's say you're facing those goblins in a really tight space. How could you combine sleep and thunderwave to take them all out?
Ooh, that's a good one. I'll let our listeners think about that one. And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive. Hope you've enjoyed this journey into the world of the High Elf Wizard.
Absolutely. Magic is powerful. Use it wisely. And may your adventures be filled with amazing spells and epic victories.